Okay, there's the close-up there. 5463, well, that's kind of up here to 5495. A little greedy for that drill stem test. This is where they're getting all the water along with the oil. But then they backed off, and let's see. Production. So they said, okay, let's do it between 5474 to 5478. So just perforating 4 feet here. 60 barrels of oil per day, no water. So they just simply nudged right at the top. So after the long drill stem test, they backed off and they just picked that, and that's where they got nothing but oil. So everything's on lock in the sense that what we see from this log then is a prediction of what's going to go on in the sequence, and it kind of matches up the production they got. And once again, as I say, as we get up in the shale up here, this is where we're getting this green band here. That's that clay-bound water at the top. Okay, carbonates is tough. When they first brought out the NMR, they really pushed it very hard in APG Explorer with all the ads and said, this is the answer to everything, as they always do. It's kind of like you have a tool is produced and the sales engineers are leading the charge, and people, once again, they say, this will solve everything. You know, it's like the old Charlie Brown cartoon where, you know, whatever her name is, sets up Charlie to kick the ball once again. Well, clearly, you're going to have problems in that if you're going to carbonates, then all bets are off because it's complex. It's not that the tool fails, it's just we don't quite understand what to do with carbonates, but we try. Classics are easy because your pores are just between sand grains. I mean, come on, there's just so much complexity you can add. Carbonates, fractures, vugs, multiporosity, the whole shebang. So it gets a little more difficult. But we'll see an example here, and this is run on Mississippian dolomite. So here we see a sequence. Schlumberger runs, so it's a CMR. So here we have the presentation then. We see the gamma ray over here. So here's our clean section with the shale above. Here we have it broken down then between the different kinds of pore spaces. So you see the relaxation time. They say, well, you're seeing the brown dashed, that's clay. And you think, well, isn't that surprising? Here we are up in the shale. And you see a certain, here's another little shale indentation there. But otherwise, it's banding it out then by size. So that means as you get to the higher colors up here, you're getting to bigger and bigger pores. And here we have our little relaxation spectrum. So for sandstone, they would choose as their cutoff 33, but for carbonates, they've done a lot of core work, they typically choose 100. So that means anything to the right, that's picking up open pores. Anything between here and the clay, that is picking up bound water and clay bound. Even looking at this, you think, well, there's carbonates for you, because notice how this line here kind of cuts through an awful lot of these distributions. So, as I say, it's kind of a little difficult. But it's quite clear in my mind that, yes, these are the bigger pores. Now, if you're going to use this to predict permeability as they do, a little hard, because you're going to have some of these big pores with vugs, and some are going to be connected and some are not. And you don't have that in the CMR to tell you which are connected. So work still needs to be done then to get something that will be useful for us. But on the other hand, there's a lot of value there if we can figure it out, because I consider this pretty much carbonate country unless you're busy shooting into those Morrow sands off your 3D seismic. So we'll find a way to go forward. So here's the breakdown then in terms of working out the pore volume. So here we have the neutron density porosity, so that's within our Mississippian dolomite. And we break down then between the bound water and the free fluid. So here, none of this is going to move. This is free fluid then that will move if you perforate or drill stem test. The next issue, of course, is what part of this free fluid is hydrocarbon and what part is water. And that's why you still need your resistivity log to say, okay, which conducts and which does not. So the arch equation is still with us, even if we have an NMR log. And so now we see this. So we've got what in fact was oil. So the green is the oil there, we've got the upper section. So down in the lower in the section, lots of water. This part is the immobile water, this is the mobile. This is the part that gets interesting right at the top. Good looking porosity. If we perforate or test right there, we say that's probably the best, in that it looks like we have very little then mobile water. So that's why I tend to focus in. I look for the intervals then that we expect to get little or no water production. Clearly, if you don't care, you say, I've got water disposal wells, I don't care, then you might be certainly a little more liberal and saying, oh, I don't care, let's take on this whole interval there. Finally, of course, one aspect was that to try and estimate permeability. And so this is the permeability estimate here, and it looked like about 10 millidarcies up there. In fact, I ran a drill stem test on the interval, and yeah, the drill stem test estimates about 10. So this curve here isn't my prediction. I went down to Schlumberger, Oklahoma City, and said, okay, what do you predict the permeability? And they kind of looked a little gun-shy because they're tired of getting whipped around. And they said, I don't know, we think about 10. And I said, you got it, it's 10. And they still looked a little gun-shy. They're so used to people saying, no, no, you're idiots. Because again, we're still trying to grope them with carbonates. Typically, if you're dealing with a major company that's going to run an NMR log, permeability is important to you in carbonates. They'll work with you. If you have some core information to at least start to do some calibration, then they can give you something that's a little more anchored on the type of reservoir you have. Sandstone's fine, not too difficult, but carbonate's always going to be a problem. So there we have your notebook there. CMR prediction permeability shows high variability, well that's for sure. Predicted permeability of 10 at the productive zone, good concordance with DST. But permeability estimates should be considered semi-quantitative, especially in absence of core measurements. But yeah, it wasn't too bad. My experience of life, I don't know yours, is the first example always works out best. That's the one that leads you into endless tears and worry. The first one always works out, and after that you spend your entire time saying, yeah, but it worked on the last one. Finally, we finish up with geochemical logging, and that is very exotic. So the geochemical tool was introduced again, I think either 84, 86, whenever industry collapsed. Schlumberger said, look at this new tool we've got. And people said, you're joking. Oil prices dropped to a third of what it is. We're not going to run this tool. Now the principle here then is, again, it's a nuclear log, but we're bombarding the formation with neutrons, and it's neutron activation. So by blasting everything with neutrons, we measure the gamma rays that are emitted. So it's not the natural gamma radiation, it's when we beat up on it with neutrons. The neutron activation is very similar then to the analysis which is done then in a lab today. It's kind of interesting when you compare logging measurements in 1927 with chemical measurements. Back in 1927, I'm pushing electrical current through a rock and trying to figure out what's going on. That's a big step from usual geology. Now, if I took that rock and took it to a lab, they'd probably dissolve it in acid and get Bunsen burners on it and do all sorts of crazy wet chemical lab stuff. Today, I'm looking at nuclear logs and neutron activation, and that's the same kind of methodology they use in a lab. So that means there's a convergence then in methods. So the earliest ones then that came out, on the one hand, when it comes to elements that we're trying to get out, we already have potassium, thorium, uranium then from the natural gamma ray spectra. Then we bombard the formation, and based on the capture spectra, we can pull out aluminum, silicon, calcium, iron, sulfur, titanium, and gadolinium. So why are they measuring gadolinium? Well, that's a good question. It's because they have to. In fact, when I first about gadolinium, I nudged my neighbor and I said, gee, they're now measuring gadolinium. And it's always the wrong person to nudge, because he then raised his hand and said, can you measure samarium as well? And I felt real fool, because gadolinium then is a rare earth element. And why you measure it? Because it absorbs neutrons like you wouldn't believe. It just sucks them up, so that's one of the curves that comes out. Very often today you won't see it on a log, because I guess they're tired of people saying, what am I supposed to do with this curve? They say, well, forget it. We're not going to show it to you. However, things of use, aluminum. Because if you really want to find the clay minerals in this, you can dance your little dance with gamma rays and neutrons and density trying to figure it out. This one says we will hit on aluminosilicates, which is what clays are. So that's another reason why people might want to run it, say, within a gas shell, say, show me the clays. And furthermore, with processing, they hope to distinguish the type of clay.